Good morning. It's good to see all your smiling faces this morning. Welcome to our worship service from the Unitarian Society of Northampton and Florence. I'm Dave Nelson and I'm your Zoom tech today. We're very glad to see you. Thanks go to Amanda Van Leckveld, who's our Zoom host this morning. We strive to be a congregation that welcomes people of all ages, races, religious beliefs, backgrounds, gender identities, and abilities. We belong to the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, and we are guided and inspired by its values and principles. Those values and principles move us to remember that we in Northampton inhabit unceded land of the Kumtuk and Nipmuc peoples. Our values and principles remind us to acknowledge our responsibility to face all the painful legacies of dispossession and systemic racism that are part of our collective history, even as we affirm and celebrate the legacies that inspire us. We're here this morning to support and celebrate one another and to renew ourselves with hope and gratitude and new resolve. If you're new or returning after a time away, welcome. We're very glad you're here. Please feel free to fill out a virtual visitor card. Doing that will allows us to put you on our contact list, and there will be a link to the card in the chat very quickly. We ask that you remain muted throughout the service and turn off your videos except during the greeting. Doing this helps the technology work as smoothly as possible. We hope you'll stay after the service for social hour. It's a great way to engage in meaningful conversations with people you might not otherwise have met. And now we'll begin our service.
Good morning. My name is Kathy Braden. I am currently serving as the past president of the Board of Trustees. Every member of your Board of Trustees is honored to be with you and participating here today. Trust is earned in the smallest of moments. It is earned not through heroic deeds or even highly visible actions, but through paying attention, listening, and gestures of genuine care and connection. Connection is why we are all here today. It is what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. Please join me and Molly Hale in the lighting of our chalice.
We light our chalice as a beacon of hope, a sign of our quest for truth and meaning. We light our chalice as a beacon of love in celebration of the life we share together.
Go ahead, Kat. You can start. I will now read you a story called The Breaking News.
Kathy, take your mask off. What you saw.
It is written and illustrated by Sarah Lynn Rule. Notice before the story begins, we see these end papers with people looking worried and sad. They seem quite apart from each other, and perhaps they don't quite know what to do. Let's begin. I remember when we heard the bad news. Notice where people are looking right now. Mom's looking at the television. Suddenly, Mom is glued to the television. Dad can't stop checking his phone. They whisper, and I pretend not to hear. It is more than a little scary. Mom forgets to tuck me in. Dad is too tired for bedtime stories. It seems like everyone else feels it too. At school, my teacher says, "Look to the helpers." I think she might have heard that from Mr. Rogers. Even when the news is bad, you can still find people trying to make things better in big and small ways. I want to help in a big way. I decide to put on the funniest show ever to make everyone laugh again. But the grown-ups don't feel like laughing. I tell them about the force fields I'll invent to keep us all safe, but their smiles are tiny and sad. I try to be on my best behavior all the time, to be so good, but they hardly notice. I think maybe there's nothing I can do to help in a big way. I feel small. So maybe I can try to do just one small thing and maybe another, and another, and one more. Small things don't solve everything. The bad news is still there after all. But then again, so are we. That is the end of the story. Notice what the children have done. They're growing things in small flower pots, and their grown-ups have followed their lead. And then the whole community started to do what they could do. And here we are at the end pages again, just like the beginning pages. But notice that they're all trying to do what they can do and to offer it up to the others around them. Thank you for being good listeners to my story. And now please join us in singing "The Spirit Says Do."
You've got to do when the Spirit says do. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you've got to do more. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 You've got to pray when the Spirit says pray. You've got to pray when the Spirit says pray. When the Spirit says pray, you've got to pray, oh Lord. You've got to pray when the Spirit says pray. 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 You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you got to sing, oh Lord. You got to sing when the Spirit says sing. 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 You've got to dance when the Spirit says dance. You've got to dance when the Spirit says dance. When the Spirit says dance, you've got to dance, oh Lord. You've got to dance when the Spirit says dance. 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 You've got to do when the Spirit says do. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you've got to do, oh Lord. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 Spirit says do.
And now it is time for us to greet one another. You are invited to turn on your videos, wave, and say hello in the chat. If you are new or newish and would like to, please say hello and tell us where you are from.
You can blah, blah, blah if you want.
So Jenny Milu saying, good morning, everyone. Kim's welcoming everyone on this sunny morning. Joan O'Brien saying it's a blessing. Naomi McClellan is saying the sun is shining. Happy to be with everyone.
Janet is saying thank you to the members of the Board of Trustees for putting together this wonderful service this morning.
Hi, Sherry Hall. Nice to be with you. Hi, Kaylee.
Kathy's just saying hi to her daughter. Thank you all for saying hello. It's wonderful to see you all. And now, please turn off your videos. You'll have a chance to greet each other and talk again at the end of the service in social hour. And now we will sing out everyone who is heading for religious education activities. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you. Go now in peace, go now in peace. You the spirit of love surround you. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you. Go now in peace, go now in peace. With the spirit of love surround us, it was madness and wrath. You may go, you may go.
Good morning. I'm Jenny Furinger. 19 years ago, I moved to Western Massachusetts, and having learned a little about Unitarian Universalism, I eagerly walked into our great hall for the first time, looking to make connections with people who I already knew held some of the same values I did. I met one of my first friends here, Karen, who was teaching an economics class on tiny little chairs down in the Sam Hill room. Then I was asked by Katie to be part of the small group circles coordinating team. And so began my first venture into doing service. From those first connections, this society has increasingly become an important part of my life. It has become my community. Over the years, I continued to accept invitations to take part and be involved, increasing my sense of purpose and belonging each time I said yes. I've gotten to know many of you in a variety of ways. I've walked with you in parades and marches for causes important to us. Together, we've held book sales and bake sales and auctions, often gathering into each other's homes, not only to sustain our society, but to support people and organizations in our wider local community and beyond. I've spent time alongside you on committees and in book groups, workshops, and discussions, which have given us space to challenge ourselves, to learn and grow and change, with the hope of bettering ourselves and making the world a better place. Because as Janet reminds us, what we do here matters. I think my favorite thing is coming together with you on Sunday mornings for worship. I'm grateful that Zoom has made it possible for our weekly services to continue, but I look forward to the day when we can once again gather together in the Great Hall, settling side by side into the pews, listening, singing, finding respite and challenge, comfort and hope. I feel that by supporting one another and working together, we are able to do much more than any of us could ever do as individuals. I am grateful for all of you, and I feel blessed to be here. We are a community because we all make it so. I know that by being here among you, I am doing my part to keep the society going strong now and into the future.
The drawings that you will see as Lemmy plays the offertory were done by members of our lay leadership, trustees, to represent their vision of what we can do during times of uncertainty, the small things that matter. Your gifts, your weekly donations to our offering help both the society and organizations in the greater community. You can write a check, you can use the donate button on our website and make a contribution to keep all of our work going, and especially to support people in the community who are really suffering during this pandemic. Our morning offering will be given now and over the week to come, and we will listen to Lemmy as he plays for us.
We take a moment now to acknowledge the events of the past week, the peaceful inauguration, the public memorials, and to honor our feelings and hopes. This is an excerpt from The Hill We Climb, the poem read by Amanda Gorman at the inauguration. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. Let's take a moment together in silence. Thank you.
ourselves to greater service. With love and justice, strive to make us free.
From Brene Brown. The courage to be vulnerable is not about winning or losing. It's about the courage to show up when you can't predict or control the outcome. We can be our worst selves when we are afraid, or our best, bravest selves. We need resilience and hope and a spirit that can carry us through the doubt and fear. We need to believe that we can affect change if we want to live and love with our whole hearts. Rather than sitting on the sidelines and hurling judgment and advice, we must simply dare to show up.
During this past year, many of us have needed to fulfill our life roles in previously unimaginable ways. In this course of doing our life's work, many persons have become unlikely heroes. Family members, delivery persons, teachers, healthcare workers, business people, community activists, and the list could go on. Many a time, one who has been dubbed a hero will often respond by saying, "I was simply doing my job." When the nominating committee asked me to serve on the president's team a couple of years ago, of course I could not have envisioned leading the congregation during these most unusual circumstances we now find ourselves in. Yet despite the unpredictable nature of our times, I find myself and the board simply doing our job, carrying on with usual business, albeit in a most unusual way. I recall our former minister, Victoria Safford, once saying that if our building ever burned down on a Saturday night, she knew we would all be gathering across the street on Sunday morning, wondering and planning where we could meet. Well, thankfully, our building has not burned down, but we have experienced the inability to meet in our building for almost a year now. I distinctly recall that week in mid-March, as I'm sure many of you can as well, when everything shut down over just a matter of days. We on the leadership team went from a discussion on Monday about whether or not to continue holding the community greeting during Sunday worship to a discussion on Thursday about not opening our doors the next Sunday to come. To the credit of Janet, the worship team, and all those scheduled to be a part of that service on March 15th, we held a virtual service that could not have been imagined nearly 7 days earlier. In the face of unforeseen adversity, we as a congregation carried on with our usual business in whatever way we could. I say we as a congregation quite intentionally. We see what needs to be done, and then each one of us recognizes what sliver of it we can do, and we step up to the plate. We rely on others to do the same, and in so doing, it all comes together. Community succeeds in accomplishing what we must, what we need, and what we want. In this way, each one of us is indeed a leader. Leaders are not only those who hold certain formalized positions, but rather anyone who takes intentional action that leaves a mark with a positive effect. It does not matter how large or small it appears, any action that has a beneficial impact is never inconsequential. Mary Tyler Moore said, "You can't be brave if you've only had wonderful things happen to you." Many, oh so less than wonderful things have happened to all of us this year. As a result, we have all become a little braver. Many of us needed to confront a fear of technology just so we could see and talk to others. Many of us overcame our hesitation about talking to strangers over the phone and brought ourselves to participate in phone banks to get out the vote, or wrote letters to the editor, perhaps for the first time. When our awareness of racial injustices grew, some of us attended demonstrations with protective gear and hand sanitizers in our pockets, facing the possibility of potential violence, all the while knowing the deep necessity to voice our values against the odds. Even a routine trip to the grocery store became an obstacle to overcome, facing invisible risks, but taking the risk to feed not only ourselves, but others. The numerous pivotal events of this past year have brought about the hero and leader in all of us. In the year ahead, as we move forward in the aftermath of the pandemic and the current political tumult, may we bring this newfound bravery with us. May we have confidence in our own ordinary, everyday leadership skills here at the Unitarian Society and beyond, using the courage and confidence we have found to deepen our commitment to one another, to our planet home, and to justice for all people, will allow us to fully realize the best of our humanity.
Well, hello, beautiful people. It's very easy to point to examples of poor leadership. We need only to look at a few weeks ago on a national level. But let's focus on leadership a little closer to home, here in our virtual Great Hall. There may be a checklist for good leadership, but it better be in pencil. Things are always changing, so why should we expect leadership to stay static? And if it can't be static, how can it be most effective? Especially if that is not our primary job, but just a volunteer commitment to a community we value. Well, board members are no more experts about any one thing than another, except what we bring to the table. We listen along the way and do the work we can, all with the best of intentions. Showing up with an open mind, a loving heart, and hands willing to do the work, and risk getting it wrong, and then repeat next month. The board is accountable to you. We have priorities set by the community, penciled out at the beginning of the year. And then things change, like a little pandemic, and remind us that a plan is just that and must change as priorities change, as circumstances change. We might not be able to accomplish all that we set out, and that's hard for those of us who want to check things off a list, because there are still things not checked off that list. We often focus on output in America. How do we know we've been productive? If we can't measure it or check it off, how do we tell you we've done the work you've asked? How can we feel useful if we are falling short of our goals and expectations time and again? I'll confess, don't tell the other board members, I don't always bring my whole self to the meeting. I have wage work, have home and elder care responsibilities, and many dogs to pet. And during the meeting, I'm eating dinner because I can't wait until the end of the meeting. There have even been 1 or 2 meetings I've missed. Is that good leadership? I mention these things because we all have more things on our shoulders than we should have. Worry about health, loved ones, things we can't control, things we used to control that we can't now. We worry about worry. During meetings, I often make suggestions that others don't think are useful or practical. But every time I suggest something, I feel active in the group. I'm heard in that moment. I am doing something. I feel useful, if not on point. And maybe it helps someone else think of something that is a better answer. It reminds me that I don't always have to have the right answer to contribute. My contribution could be direct. My contribution can be indirect. And sometimes my contribution is to be silent, allow space for others and a break for myself. That's been a gift for me this year, to be imperfectly present, to give myself the same kind of grace I would for others. I do not expect you to be perfect or without worry or fatigue. And so I learn. And I think that is a good quality to model. I'll leave you with this: be imperfectly you, be imperfectly present, be willing to be wrong, be willing to be silent and listen, be willing to be human and remember why we are doing this work, because what we do here matters, even when here is really hard to define right now.
Good morning. I'm Judy Hyde. So vulnerability, according to the poet David White, is not something we can arrange to do without. It's the underlying, ever-present undercurrent of our natural state. It's not about being exposed or open to others, but being open to one's own inner experience. Faced with this topic of vulnerability and trust in the past year, I came to understand that who I am now is all about who I was before, and how the collapse of my life when I was 54 changed and strengthened me. One day, when I returned from work, I found a note from my partner of 4 years saying that this was no longer home. She was gone for good. I had never lived alone. I was stunned and lost. 10 days later, I got a call late at night that a man had shot and killed his 6-year-old daughter in my office during a supervised visitation service. The child's mother managed to escape behind a door, but my worker had been injured. Now the killer was at large, perhaps on his way to get me. I called a friend on the board of the Child Protection Council I headed, and she came right away with her armed husband to spend the night. The next morning, she and I would head out to the office together to see what had come down there. But First, I needed to take my 23-year-old son's black lab, Boz, to him. I called his house to tell him I was coming over with the dog. Instead of my son, John, a policeman answered the phone. He told me John was dead. In an instant, I had lost my love, my child, and my work. In that terrible time, I remember a moment of clarity when I saw the real possibility of being sucked down into a powerful black vortex so deep I wouldn't be able to climb out of it. At that moment, I turned myself over to Spirit, asking to be taken care of for a while. In my tattered, shredded form, I was pretty much deserted by friends and family who simply didn't know how to help in such a case. Surviving and not getting sucked down under was a matter of life and death. Could I discover new ways of self-care? Could I rely on as yet undiscovered inner voice of mine? Could I trust my resilience? My discovery of a restorative root system underlying my ruined life would come later. Turned out there was a life force energy in me greater than I had ever experienced. I had to trust the voice I heard in my head, which was not my own voice, telling me a week after the murder, now is when you must figure out how to create a voice for high-risk children in family court proceedings. I said, oh, please, I'm so tired. But that spirit, my angel, was doing its work in me that was redemptive. Before that awful year was over, I had founded the Children's Law Center of Connecticut, which by now has provided representation for thousands of poor children caught in high conflict custody cases. And after 3 misfires, I finally got the partnership thing right a couple of years later with Helen. I also became an adoring elder to a young man, an undergraduate at the university, who is now out of the woods with his substance misuse issues, and he's well launched as an adult. When I agreed to be on the board, it wasn't with any assurance that at 82, I still had something to contribute. It was trusting my inner knowing that being a fully participating member of this community is what serves my soul. It's not been easy to share this story today. It'll always be heavy going for me, and I expect maybe for you. I feel the ground quivering. But on we go, you and me. I'm trusting you to be tender, trusting Spirit to stay with me, whatever happens. Amen.
Thank you, Judy. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful, as always, to be gathered with all of you here today. This has been a viral year, a climactic year of disease like no other in my lifetime. You all know it because you're living it too. For me, at the heart of my dis-ease is fear and vulnerability. I suspect that's true for many of you too. Vulnerability is defined as the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. Let's see what we've got. The COVID virus, check. The threat of becoming ill, exposing others, even dying. Am I putting myself, people I love, my communities at risk? The pandemic of racism. If we believe in the interdependent web of life, assaults on Black, Indigenous, people of color are assaults on all of us. My freedom as a white person is inextricably intertwined with the freedom of Black and Brown people. The very public rise of white nationalism and violent assault on our democracy, check. The the devastating march of climate change, in unprecedented global warming this year and melting ice caps, check. In normal times, some of us, and I include myself, are in the habit of arming ourselves with shields and masks, and I don't mean the literal ones we wear now. We arm ourselves to defend against vulnerability, the possibility of real or imagined harm. However, these are not normal times. We can't help but acknowledge and lean into the uncertainty and vulnerability. We have no choice. Potential harm has been staring at us from every corner. But what does surrendering into vulnerability look like? At USNF, I think it looks like deepening connection, a letting go of formality and control. We're in one another's living rooms and kitchens, showing up as we are, inviting our fellow community members to do the same, whether weary, afraid, grateful, sad, worried, overwhelmed, angry, hopeful, and on, and inviting it all with an embrace of love and belonging. And I'm thinking of you in this moment, Judy. I hear it in connection circles, experience it during our randomized social hours, in calls to one another, and in drop-in Zoom community meetings. As a member of the board, I see it in the boardroom too. This would not be a year of long range or strategic planning. We'd spend our board retreat leaning into the uncertainty and vulnerability of the moment as individuals and as board members. What did we and our congregation most need at this time? We'd lead with the well-being and immediate needs of the USNF community, whether for connection, mutual support, a commitment to virtual worship and safety, help with errands and resources and opportunities to engage in spiritually driven social justice work, to get out the vote, support sanctuary, save our planet, or promote racial justice and healing in ourselves and across divides. Dr. Brene Brown, in pioneering research, dispels the notion that vulnerability is a weakness. In fact, she calls it the birthplace of joy, love, and belonging. The willingness to take off our masks and put down our shields is essential to being what she calls wholehearted, or what we call leading in love. I think back on our decision to do sanctuary and the risks and uncertainty of it all, of how we as a congregation decided to take the plunge and then fell in love, becoming softer around the edges. Many of us, though, struggle with vulnerability. I know I do a lot. Why? Because as Brene Brown reminds us, shame, fear, and the struggle for worthiness are also at the core of vulnerability. Sometimes I wonder if my difficulty with vulnerability is in part because I'm white and conditioned to feel and be superior. Vulnerability is hard. The very thing that can trigger our I'm not good enough shame can also set us free. With the courage to be imperfect and learn, with more compassion for ourselves and others in our individual and collective imperfections, we can show up just as we are, warts and all, and still be lovable and worthy. Wow, the inherent worth and dignity of all beings, the interdependent web of life, healing divisions, it's all here. And here's the breaking news. We've all had a lot of practice with courage and compassion these past 11 months. Being seen and known in new ways, finding patience and compassion in stillness, learning to Zoom, whether we like to or not, making calls and writing postcards to strangers to get out the vote, sitting with the unraveling of who we are, even as we take in racism, white supremacy, and the faltering of our democracy, and just plain showing up. I am enough. You are enough. May our collective journey continue as we summon our courage, try on vulnerability, embrace compassion, and strive for authentic connections among ourselves and in ever-widening circles. May it be so.
Let's join now in singing What a Day, Soon the Day Will Arrive.
Soon the day will arrive when we will be together and no longer will we live in fear. And the children will smile without wondering whether on that day thunder clouds will appear. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Some have dreamed, some have died to make a bright tomorrow, and our vision remains in our hearts. Now the torch must be passed with new hope, not in sorrow, and a promise to make a new start. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me.
Our closing words come from Dan Millman, author of The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. Faith means living with uncertainty, feeling your way through life, and letting your heart guide you like a lantern in the dark. Life comes at us in waves. We can't predict or control those waves, but we can learn to surf. Speaking for the entire Board of Trustees, it has been our deepest privilege to learn how to surf these tumultuous waves with you this year and to let our hearts guide us in our service to you. Let us go now in peace.